Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I am sorry about missing last week's podcast. Pretty much haven't done that since before Everest or when Everest was born. I think I missed some podcasts in there, but I'm excited about this week's podcast. I was thinking a little bit about it and thinking about the places that we've moved and the places that we've lived, the places that I've personally lived in my life. And currently, we live in the country. So I've just thought about, the different places, and I've been thinking about is it better in the country to live or is it better in the city? And I'm not sure I'm going to come up with a solution tonight, but maybe I will after thinking about it and kind of processing it with you. I kind of put an outline together of different things that I like about each. I don't know if I can pick one. I don't know if I have one that I like more just because they both are unique. They both have their pros and they both have their cons. And I don't know if I can live in one forever. There'll probably come a point where I'll decide I can't do anything. I don't want to move anymore, But right now I want some of both, I don't really want to settle for one city or country. But, so right now we don't have to make that decision. I'm not sure if I'm going to make a decision tonight in this conversation. Maybe I'd like to hear your feedback. Please subscribe and comment, leave a review. That would be amazing. You can DM me any topics or things you want to hear, or comments or things you thought about the podcast. That would be amazing. Please leave a review. It really helps. And let's just jump into it. So, I think I'm going to start with country, living in the country. By the way, as you saw by the title of this podcast, it's country versus city life, and we're going to compare and contrast a little bit. I just wrote all the things about country, pros or cons, all mixed in there, and then I wrote all the things about the city. My drink of choice for today's podcast is sparkling ice, classic lemonade. It's a sparkling water with 0 sugar. It's amazing. Not sponsored at all. Just wanted to share that. Okay, country. Let's jump into it. Okay, so the country life, it is slower, man. There is, not as much to do in the country. So you have a slower pace of life. You work and you play and you are not interacting with a lot of people. Maybe you are, but more than likely you have the option to be alone or alone with your family. Life, is calm. There's not as many cars driving around. It's not as busy. When you're done with work, you're done with work because you're home. You can't go anywhere. You can't do anything unless you work from home. Well, there you go. But even so, even if you're working at home, it's like life is just slower in a way, it feels like, because you don't have all the hustle bustle type of deal, And when it's winter, if you live in a really wintry place, life really slows down in the country. There may not be as many events going on, so in the winter, so then, you are inside a lot, and you aren't seeing as many people, life is just slow, I feel like, in the country. Maybe you're farming, maybe you work and you drive into the city and life feels fast, but when you go back to the country, it's like man, things just slow down. And I think there's more time to think when you're in the country. There's a lot more, I'm going to talk about this later, but like nature. So I feel like nature is super inspiring, you know? So you have time to enjoy the world around you more. Whereas if you're in the city, you know, you're just trying to get from place to place. There's not nature around you to sit and enjoy, you know, like there is in the country. You have ample space to sit down, you know, have lunch, have a picnic, and look at the views, sunsets, you know, all the things. So I think it really slows down. But okay, so when you live in the country, you have small towns. The towns are smaller, less people, smaller schools, smaller community boards, these type of things. You know, that small town vibe. You're not like you're like a big fish in a small pond, or instead of like a drop in a bucket, you know, where nobody sees you, nobody knows your name. But in a small town, everybody knows your name. Everybody knows your story. Everybody knows your family's story. You know, that could be good or bad. You know, it depends on what your story is. But in a small town, there's, you know, events to go to, but you may have a big part. Whereas if you lived in the city, you may not have as big of a part in your city council, or, you know, the happenings that are going on in your town. You may not have a say, you may not have a sway, but you may in a small town. And that's something really positive about being in a small town. You can actually make a difference in the world around you in a big way in a small town. You know, small towns sometimes come with, you know, not as many options at the grocery store. You know, you go to like meat raffles and stuff, you know, where people are raffling off guns and meat and to raise charity, and you walk in and you know everybody's name and everybody knows your name, and you're playing bingo on Wednesday nights, you know, I know, like, and you know everybody, and they're sitting at their one same table, you know, the same table they like, and seeing what's going on in Sherry and Shelby's lives, and Susan's back from school, and blah, blah, blah. So-and-so is having an affair with so-and-so, and, you know, all that. It could be good, it could be bad. It's nice to know your neighbors, you know, but it could be bad if you have things you just want to keep private within your family. They don't even have to be bad things. You just want to keep your family private. It may be a little bit harder in a small town, you know, but it also is nice to have a small town because you know everybody. And you can just walk over to your neighbors and ask for a cup of milk or a cup of sugar, you know. People are willing to lend a helping hand to help because everybody feels like family, you know what I mean? I'm watching Gilmore Girls right now, and it's just in Stars Hollow. It's just a small town, and I just love it so much. I don't think they're necessarily in the country. Maybe they're in the country. It's a little more country than, like, Hartford. I don't even know if Hartford's a real city. I think I looked up Stars Hollow in Connecticut. It doesn't exist. But I don't know if Hartford does. Maybe Hartford does. I didn't know. Anyways, small town vibe. So cute. So good. Okay, people know each other and people know you. It's really nice when you walk into the coffee shop and you know Jim behind the counter that owns the coffee shop, and you know all his employees and what grade they're in and what they're doing in their lives, and you know all his employees' families, you know. I mean, that's sweet. That really is something you only get in a small town because people don't take the time of day in a big town to get to know the people serving them when it comes to coffee. And maybe they do, maybe, but not everyone. Whereas in a small town, most everybody knows everybody, or people know of you. Whereas in a big town, you may never be known because it's just too big, unless you're very intentional. But you wouldn't know everyone. You would just know some people or take the time, Next, smaller events. I kind of touched on this. You have small events in a town, and maybe it's a big event in the town, but it's a small event when it comes to how many people are there. You know what I mean? Yeah, like you might have like a book club, or you might have I don't know, a fair or something, but it's going to be a smaller scale, where a lot of the people. You might have a lot more events in the country because there's not as much to do. Sometimes I think in small towns they'll make more things to do, a lot more events type of thing, so that people are getting together. It's building camaraderie, it's building togetherness, that kind of thing. Yeah. You know most of the people when you get there. I already kind of touched on this. When you go to an event, you'll probably know most of the people, if not everybody, and everybody knows you, and it's no surprise. But it's cool in a way because it's like, oh, everybody's gonna be there. It's like all your friends, like, oh, do you think everybody's gonna be at so-and-so's wedding? Okay, because they invite the whole town to their wedding, because it's a small town. You can invite the whole town to, like, that sort of thing, But in a big town, you could never do that. Of course not, But I love the fact that in a small town, you can know, like, when I go to my sister's small town, we will walk in and she will know, even if she doesn't know some people well, she'll know everything about them. And it's so interesting that people just know everything about everybody, no matter what, and news just travels fast in a small town. It's just so interesting. And I mean, I think, people, I don't know. Okay, anyways. I think I wrote more love, ? In a way, yes, because people are willing to help. They're willing to be generous. They're willing to, take you under their wing. They're willing to slow down and think and take care of you, if you're in need. Whereas in a big city, people are never willing. I mean, not always. Sometimes they are, but more than likely you're going to find people more willing to help and be generous in a small town because, one, there's not much to do and life is slower. But I think just in general, people in the country might be a little bit more kind-hearted. Maybe not. Maybe that's just a generalization and unfair. But I think in the city, there's an overarching mentality to, succeed and make as much money as you can and look a certain way and be a certain way, and that pressure is everywhere, of course, but like in the city, I think it's a little more intense and more desirable because people are putting their whole lives into, sorry, I just had a hangnail on my pinky toe. Not that you needed to know that, but it was kind of bothering me. Anyways, so I took care of that. But anyways, there's kind of like an overarching mentality, and not that it wouldn't be in the country, it most certainly is, but I think people are a little are really open-minded, and people know you. If you lived in a small town and you needed help, they already know you. So of course they're gonna help you. You know what I mean? Whereas a lot of times I think people are not always as willing to help someone when they don't know them, because are they dangerous? You don't know if someone that you're helping that's randomly out the street is gonna rob you or do something crazy. Whereas if you know them and you know their family and where they live, and you know, you're more likely, you know, you're gonna get caught then because they know you. Whereas, and so people won't do stuff even if they wanted to, and most likely people in a small town wouldn't do anything because everybody knows everybody, and maybe they're generally better, like, good-hearted, you know. So I think there is more love in the country when it comes, like, to other people and communities and what people are, you know, about. I think there's just more love in the country. I put gossip, ? Yeah, I think, I don't think that there's necessarily more or less gossip in the country than in the city, because if you work in a big city but you're a firm or whatever, or let's say you work in a firm, people are gossiping there about everybody, and everybody knows everybody in that firm, you know, they're all gossiping. That's like a mini town, and that's just the same. But if you're in a small town, it's not like people aren't gossiping. People are gossiping because they know everything about everybody, so they're all sharing it. So, you know, I think it's just a different, like, skin, same situation, different skin. They have, like, it wouldn't be the whole town gossiping about something. It's like a company, maybe there's a ton of gossip in there, like a small town, you know, versus a small town. Exactly, you know. So it's basically, I think they're similar. Your whole town can't, you know, gossip about the whole town because the whole town doesn't know each other in the big city. So people getting involved in your life, if you own things there or not. I kind of was thinking, like, if you own things, like, I was kind of thinking, like, Taylor Luke situation, kind of, like, people want to get in on your business if you own things to make it a certain way, maybe for their own gain or whatever. I don't know if that's really a situation, but I think in a small town, maybe people in a small town want to get on other people to, you know, sway what they want to happen with the board or the city or the donations or money or charity or whatever. And I definitely think that happens because I've seen it in our town where the city board wants to, like, ruin things for certain people just because they want their way, you know. For example, they won't let the people of this town have VRBOs because it's a tourist town, and they want people that live here to be full-time living here to create a bigger community because it puts more money in the city council. But they banned rental homes, more new rental homes, so because rental homes won't bring in, like, steady income to the city because they're rental and people come and leave and that's it, you know. So that right there is a perfect example of, you know, other people getting involved in your life, whether, like, just because, you know. I feel like in the country there's more room to breathe, there's more time and more room to get away from maybe your negative thoughts, or get alone. Place to get alone with the Lord, a place to think of your thoughts and put your thoughts together and think of a plan and just worship the Lord. Whereas in the city it's so hard to think any thoughts because there's just so much going on and so much loud everything, and in the country it's quiet and no one says a word and no one interrupts you, and you are free to be you wherever you're at and think and to contemplate life. In the country there's just more space to do that and to have a beautiful view while doing it. Next, animals. To be able to have deer walk right past your front door and it not be any, just be normal for deer to walk past your window. And like just today we had the front door open and the windows open, and I'm like seeing like fur walk through past our, like just tiny out the window from sitting on our couch, and I looked closer and it was like a bunch of deer just walking right past of our front window and our front door. And it's so nice to just know that we have friendly creatures everywhere. It's just so sweet. And the deer and the rabbits and the eagles, to be able to hear an eagle, like whatever they do, they make their noise. It's so sweet and it's refreshing, and I just love nature, and I love to be able to have animals just super close, and wildlife, and just enjoy the world with all of the creatures that the Lord made. You can't get that all the time in the city. Yeah, maybe possibly a little bit, but they're usually a nuisance and they're looking for food. When it's wild, they're not always, maybe they are looking for food, but like they're kind of just around more so than anything. Okay, next, nature in general is just so healing. And like when you're out in nature, you can go and sit up on a mountain and sit on a rock and just look over the beautiful view and just hear the Lord speak about his creation and about what's going on in your life and what he wants to do and where he wants to go. I just feel like you can hear clearer. You can think, like, I can feel like I can just hear the Lord better when I'm out in nature. You know what I mean? And it's so refreshing. Like a brisk, foggy morning up in the mountains is primo nature. It's so inspiring. And I love that about nature. You just can't get that from anything else. Not the city, not buildings. I would think, being in New York and you look over all the buildings, it's just a really majestic thing to think about how all those buildings were built. And it probably is pretty with the sunset, but it's not nature. There's just no comparison. You know what I mean? Okay, space to run. For me, personally, I'm a runner. I like to walk. I like to be outside. Everest and I go for multiple walks a day. I do like to run, but lately I have been a walker since having a baby, and I ran right after having a baby, but now I feel like I'm kind of just a walker. I'm a mom walker, but I need that space, and that's so good. Again, being out in nature and being able to get outside and get out walking, and even it's so good for like littles. If you have any littles, like it helps them so much, all the stimulation, and makes them tired, and they get to be out and about and look at nature and look around and point at stuff and see animals walking by, see the deer. Oh, it's so special. Space for kids to run and play and explore. That's so clutch. As myself growing up in nature, growing up in the country, part of my life was in the country. Me and my siblings would run around in the woods and make forts and explore and find clues to random mysteries we were making up, and explore the forest and find weird mushrooms and find weird sticks, and I don't know, find animal scat and just explore and look at stuff and run around and find things that families that lived in the house before us left out in the yard, and just stumble upon the craziest stuff. And I just think it's so healthy for kids to do that. And if you live in the city, you might be worried about them only being able, they can't be in the front yard because, I don't know, people might come by and try to take them, or, whatever, and they might have to only stay in the backyard, and the backyard might be really small, and then they can't really run around that much. It's like, 20 foot, and then they have to turn around, whereas, like, in the country, you can run and run and run and run and run, and there's, like, no end. You know what I mean? So, yeah. It's so healthy for kids. You can go to an establishment or store, and people by name, or like cops, for example. Like, I know the cops in our town by name. That is so cool. Or like, you can go to the same store, like to the store, and you'll know the people at the cash register, or the manager, or the janitors. Like, that's so cool. Or the stock people at the grocery store. Like, that is something special. You build relationships, you get to know them, even if you just know them like on a really small scale. It's so sweet, It's special. It really is. And maybe you can do that in the city, but I think it's more common in the country, because it's smaller. Yeah. You can make a real difference in your small town. Like, for example, like, you can start, benefit, well, you could do that in a big town, but I just feel like there's more of an impact you can make. Maybe it's because they're smaller, not as many people, and you can impact those people. The impact that you have because there's less of them is greater. Whereas if you have a big town and you make, impact one or two or the same amount of people, it's not as a big of an impact as it would be in a small town per ratio of people, that kind of thing. I think you could be on the board, the city council or the board or something, and really make awesome changes for your town. How cool is that, Or you can just go out and preach the gospel, and your city, like, begin to be transformed. You can do this in a big city, but I just feel like in a small town, word gets around more, maybe the pay it forward situation will happen and trickle through faster. You never know. I just feel like in a small town, it's much easier to make a difference, have things be change, Change is spread faster. The word spreads faster. Everything is quicker there when it comes to that. Maybe. I don't know. Not many exotic places to eat. This is a real problem, I think, in the country. You probably have a bunch of burger and fry places if you're in the country, or steak places, not really any Indian food or sushi or Thai or Filipino or maybe you have Italian. Italian's pretty widespread in America, even in hick towns. But like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just hard to get a really fun, exotic meal that actually tastes good. I mean, you might try some, a Thai place, but it might not be up to par like if you lived in a big city. That's a real problem. It's a really sad thing. But then again, people that come from overseas or from different places usually will tend to live in the city and not live in the country. There's a higher population of the people that are maybe from their country, so that makes sense that they would live in the city. But I'm sure there's people that live in the country, you know, that are from other countries as well. And if they, and I just feel like it's really rare. I really don't go to many country, like out in the country places and find like a really good exotic meal. You know, it's a rare anomaly type situation. Um yeah, you have your burger and fry places aplenty. It's just too much. The steak shops and the steak restaurants and the burger places are just too, that's like all they do out in the country, and it's really sad and really annoying. Um Super old, super fast. Yeah, I just can't stand it. Um Kids get to grow up running and playing with neighbor kids, while it could be dangerous in the city to do the same. I love that about being in the country. I mean, don't get me wrong, like I grew up part of my childhood in the city and we lived in a safe neighborhood at the time. So during the day we ran from house to house and a bunch of us kids, like 12 kids, ran in a big pack and we all played games and la di da. And so that was cool and we ran around, but like I don't know how that was like, I mean 12, 10, 12 years ago. I just don't think that that's as much of a thing. Maybe in more of a suburb or in the country. Again, in the suburb or in the country, they do that, but not in the city. So in the country, one of my friends, my sister lived in the country in Sweden, and she said the same thing happened where a whole group of kids would run through from house to house with all these kids, and like in the country it's just, you can do that. There's more room to do that, and it just, I don't know, it feels safer for some reason rather than in the city. I don't know. Okay. You feel a bit safer in the country at night, or any time for that matter, rather than being in the city, especially if you live in the inner city. You're probably not going to feel as safe during the day, let alone at night. You might feel okay at night and you might be used to it. You might be numb to it. But I think someone that comes from a super safe area to go to like an inner city kind of can feel it's kind of hood, la di da, like these kinds of things. So, um, yeah, it can tend to feel hood, or the city can tend to feel hood in a lot of places, and that just makes you feel not as safe. I don't know. Country just feels safer most of the time. There's not as many jobs available when you live in the country. This is kind of tough. But today they also have a lot of remote jobs that you can do working from home. It's super acceptable now. Thank you, COVID, for that kind of situation, which is really, really awesome, especially for stay-at-home moms and this sort of thing. You know, working from home is a really great opportunity. But if you have a traditional job, like a traditional farm job or something like that, then, you'll have plenty of jobs or plenty of work, if you live out in the country. But other than that, you might have to travel quite a ways to have a good job. I think a lot of times you can save a lot of money living in the country just because there's oftentimes nothing to do, especially in the winter if you live in a really cold place. You're going to be saving money since you're not going out to eat, you're not going out and doing things. I think living in a warm place in the country, you might be outside, but you're still probably not going to spend as much money. You might buy things online, of course, but I think just living in the city, you're more likely to go out to eat a lot more. You're more likely to just spend money on doing things, whether there's events or like games, professional games, or just different like things that you have to pay for to do. Whereas when there's nothing to do in the country, you just kind of stay inside and you stay home, so that alone will start to rack up and save money. You can try new country things when you live in the country, like parasailing over a lake. Maybe I don't normally see that. We're off a cliff. Hiking, like high cliffs, or camping, or backpacking, or kayaking, or fishing, or skydiving. These are different outdoors country things you can do that if you've never done them, or even if you're used to them and you've tried them, like these are all options of things that you can do where you can't really do those in the city. You have to go to a country, a place where there's lots of space to do a lot of these things. Maybe there's a lake in the city, but usually lakes in the city are really gross and you don't really want to get in them anyways. They're often polluted and just not fun to be in, and often really yucky, murky, yucky looking lakes. Sometimes man-made too, the worst. You never have any traffic. This is my last point. You never have any traffic. You just go wherever you want, when you want, how you want, and you don't have to worry about, there being a traffic jam, or, often there's not very many accidents, and if it is, it's just the one car off in the ditch, and it's not like a holdup, You're just kind of driving down the road, minding your own business. And I love that about the country. You don't have to worry about trying to get on a highway and having tons of people on the road. You're by yourself. And you don't have to worry about that or anyone else, or try to leave super early to get to anywhere because you are in the country. There's no traffic. Never. There's never traffic. Okay. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit about the city, positive things and negative things. Okay, so the first thing about the city is that there are so many places to eat. Like, you can walk down the street. Like, when we lived in the city, I could literally walk down our block and get food. I could drive 2 minutes and get food in any direction. I could get boba in multiple directions. It was the best. You can get, and there's so many places to eat, so many options, so many varieties that you just don't get when you live in the country. That's definitely a huge perk, obviously, because it was my number one thing to write down. And like when you're trying to celebrate in the country, you just can't, unless you have to make a huge effort, drive 30, 40 minutes to get to the place. Whereas in the city, you literally drive 5 minutes and grab food, and you can come bring it back home, or you can stay out. But even when you drive home, it's a 5-minute drive, 10-minute drive, 15-minute drive to get back home. Whereas if you go out and make the effort in the country, you're driving 40 minutes out, 40 minutes back. You might spend an hour there. So it's a 3-hour deal in the country, where it will be an hour at the restaurant, hour and a half, and then a 5-minute drive home or a 5-minute drive there. It's just so much more convenient and just so much better than in the country. There's so much to do in the city. There's like just a list. Any big city, you can just list like tourist things to do. That alone will set you up with days and days and days of things to do. And even if you live in a big place, like let's say you live in like Chicago, there is so much to do. So many shows you can go to. There are so many different mini cities, like Chinatown or whatever, and just so many restaurants just in that little space that you can go and explore. And like the bean or whatever that is, that big silver bean, like there's so many different things that's like don't have to pay for, and I'm sure there's like different free events. There's so many free events in the city that you can go to, like live music, these kinds of things out in the park, like they always have different fairs or different things, but there's just so much to do, and there's always something going on. And in the country, you just don't have that. Like maybe you have Wednesday bingo, and they do have events, like, but it's not as a big a variety as you will get in the city. Like if you're a hippie, like they have tons of hippie type of events, it doesn't matter. Like, there's always something going down. And like the tourist spots, like if you live in Dallas, like there's always live music somewhere in Dallas, and there's so many different mini towns. Like there's the art district in Dallas, and there's so much going on just in that art district, and if you go to like San Antonio, like they have bingo every single night, and that's just bingo alone, and they have different nights and bowling leagues. I mean, they have that in the city, in the country, I think, but you have to go into a bigger city to get that. So technically it's a city you're in, not a country. So there's just so much more to do in the city, and I don't know, it makes life a little bit more fun, I think, in a way too, because you're going and doing things. Although just being at home is also really fun too, and just relaxing when you live in the country. And sometimes you can get FOMO, I feel like, if you live in the city, because there's always something going on. And if you have lots of friends in that city, they are always doing something, and there's always some event, some wedding, some church event that's going on, and there's always something to do in the city. So I do love that about the city. There's always options. You can choose to stay home, but you can also choose to go to whatever event. Whereas in the country, there's most likely not an event going on. It's very rare, and not rare, but maybe one event once a week or something like that. And for like an extrovert, that's kind of not a good deal. Maybe for an introvert, that's like the best deal in the whole world. So, maybe if you're an introvert, maybe you should live in the country. And if you're an extrovert, maybe you should be living in the city. I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. Okay, so there's so many people to meet. Like when you live in the city, you can go to all those events I talked about and meet someone new every single day. Every single day, every single event, you'd be meeting new people all the time. That's really great for a single person new to the city. Like you can meet so many people. I mean, it's good for anyone to be meeting new people and exploring and hearing about all their experiences and things that they've gone through, and just like broadening your horizon when it comes to life and making new connections. I don't know. You don't know what the Lord will do at any point, but it's just fun to, meet new people, and the world, like just to share your perspective and just to share your heart and share the gospel with everybody, everywhere that you meet. And you have that option when you live in the city. Like, even if you shared the gospel with a person, you might never see them again because you just met them at this random event or whatever. You'll probably never see them again if you don't want to, in a big city. Whereas if you're in the country and you probably know everybody already at every single event. Maybe you don't, but once you are starting to get to know people, like we live in there's a coffee shop in our town. It's like a 1 or 2 coffee shop town, and we know all the people that work there. You know what I mean? You see them every day, and you often will start to see the same people going to the coffee shop, the ones that live in the town, especially if you live in a tourist town. That's not always the case, but yeah, you just don't get that as much in the city. So, but there's a lot of people that you get to meet, and you can't get that in the country. Like, there's not always as many people to meet. unless you live in a tourist town during that high season, then you can meet lots of people, but they leave in a week, so you don't really get to like meet them to stay. Whereas if you live in a big city and they're staying and they live there, well, you could meet so many people and they're not leaving, go back to wherever they live in a different state. You know what I mean? They live right there. There's so many more things that you can offer in a city, so many more options, and so many things that are offered to you in a city. You can maybe do a whole slew of different kinds of jobs, or get involved in multiple events, head up different, social clubs, or so many different things there's just more options, opportunities, situations you can get into where life can change for you in a good way when you live in the city. You meet different people, and whatever your dream job could happen in a big city. Whereas if you live in the country, you don't have as many options. You definitely don't have the option for, making that many connections as much as in a big city. More options for jobs. You can try different things you've never tried before. Whereas in the country, you're just super limited to the jobs that are available in your town, let alone in the city, the nearest city. You might have more opportunity in the nearest city, but in a city where if you live in the city, it's right there, and you could try new jobs, like I said, like that you've never done before, and it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, because you can just go get another job, because there's so many jobs in a big city, you know what I mean? Whereas if you lose your job in the country, it might be the most devastating thing in the world, because it might take you a really long time to get a new job in the country, because there are no jobs in the country. Everyone's all taking them, If you live in the city, there's possibly more churches to choose from, rather than in the country. There's probably a one church and a one bar. It's like a one church, one bar town, and it's probably one or two different denominations, and that's it. And so if you are Lutheran and you live in a Methodist and Catholic church town, I mean, that kind of stinks, So if you live in the city, though, you can choose from multiple different Lutheran churches, you know what I'm saying? So that is a plus. That is a huge plus, especially if that's super important to you, to be able to, have your, community, your faith community, that is, so important. So there's more schools to choose from. If you live in a country, there's probably only one school, if you're lucky, in, a 30-mile radius, or 50, 100 miles, whatever. Like, there's probably only one town or one school, and you have no other choice but to send your kids there. Let alone if you live in the city, you could choose private, or, immersion school, or you could do multiple different public schools. Maybe they won't let you, because if you're in the a different school district, maybe not, but you could just move to put your kids in a really good school district. I know a lot of people do that. You could also homeschool, of course, but I'm sure that's more of in the country, people can homeschool, and you can homeschool in the city, of course, but if you don't and you want to send your kids to school, you just have way more options in the city rather than in the country. You're just going to have to deal with what there is, which isn't always a good thing. There's so many more friends to pick from and to be with when you live in the city. You have lots of options. You can make new friends. If you don't have very good friends, you can always make new friends in a better community, and lots of different events to meet new friends at. Hopefully your faith and church community would be a good place, to meet lots of new friends. If you already have good friends, you can always make new friends but, introduce your new friends to your old friends. But it's nice to be able to have lots of friends, Sometimes your close friends aren't always available, to hang out. And then you have other people you can hang out with on an occasional basis as well. But whereas in the country, if you have 5 friends and they're all busy or they're all doing something, then you're stuck and you're out of luck. You gotta hang out by yourself or do something else. You can't always have that option in the country, whereas in the city you'll have lots of options. I feel like in the city parks are a little bit closer, whereas in the country you have to drive to a park oftentimes. You can just have one at the end in your homeowners association. There could be a park, or oftentimes by a near lake. When you live in the city, there's often a lake there. Again, the lakes aren't usually clean in the city, so you might not want to be in the lakes. But if you're at a park or walk around the lake, feed the ducks. Oftentimes people don't want you to feed the ducks, But the kids can play at the park. And I just feel like in the city, it's just a lot easier to get there. And it's really convenient. Whereas in the country, you're often going to have to drive to it, and that takes a lot of time and effort. Whereas in the city, it's so quick, easy, and it's a free thing to do that doesn't cost anything, that is really time-consuming, wears out the kids. It's great. It's a great event. Kids, I kind of touched on this earlier. Kids may not be able to be out alone very long unless they're in the backyard, and that really stinks for a kid to not be able to just run free and explore and jump and play and jump on rocks and grab neighbor kids and run, and play, whereas if they're in the city, they're probably just going to be confined to the backyard or their neighbor's backyard, and the front yard might be, not a safe place for kids to be, playing in the front yard. They might have to be in the backyard only where there's a fence and they're safe. That's definitely a downfall thing to the city, whereas it's just way better for kids to be able to just run, leave the house and come back in an hour or two after playing and running around out in nature, not having to worry about mountain lions, of course. But just explore and look at wildlife and learn, on their own. I think the city can start to feel kind of crowded and crammed, whereas and it can feel like there's just too many people, whereas when you're in the country, you're just a little bit more, it feels more free. You have space, you're not always being watched. I think in the city, people like to people watch a lot. I mean, in the country too, people do, but I just feel like there's just more space, more freedom, whereas in the city, it just can feel really, really crowded and crammed. In the city, there's no place to run except you might have to drive to get to a good place rather than walking out your front door. This was a huge thing when I lived in the city. It was really hard to find a good place to run. We lived in an apartment at one point, and there's just nowhere to run. The neighborhood behind us was kind of hood, and it just wasn't that safe. It was fine during the day, but in the evenings or early mornings, it just wasn't as safe. So that's a really difficult thing in the city, to find a good place that is safe for running and being outside, In the city, you can just pop over to a neighbor's by walking. This is so nice and so convenient. You can just visit. Like, it's not like you might not go visit friends if they live 15 minutes away, 20 minutes away if you have kids, but if you are out walking in your own neighborhood and you have a really good neighbor and you just pop in just to say, hey, it might turn into an hour or two conversation. They might join you on your walk. You might pop in and just say hello, and then they invite you to tea, and then your kids are playing with their kids. It's just a lot easier to meet a friendly face and just hang out with your neighbor if you live like right, and it's not out of your way to spend time with them. It's just part of what you were doing anyways. That really makes it convenient. I think it would be just a really positive thing, a really nice thing to be able to do that often, live close to good friends and just pop over. Even if it's just for 10-15 minutes, just to say hi, just to hang out, see how they're doing, So convenient, and I just feel like, yeah, so good. You have to walk your dog on a leash in the city. This one really stinks. I mean, in the country, you can just take your dog off the leash as long as they know. Most dogs, I feel like, listen and know when to come back. There's just a rare few dogs that just don't listen and don't behave. But if your dog does listen and behaves, I mean, in the country, you can just let your dog run free, explore, jump around, wear out all the energy. It's a dog's dream. But like in the city, I just feel like people in the city should not have dogs, really. Maybe cats. Sorry if you're a city dog person, but like it just I feel like it's not as healthy for dogs. I feel like dogs should be able to run free and run around and play outside as much as they want and get all tuckered out and come in and out, and just have a good life. They, in cities, they're often in crates or stuffed in the house all day, and it's just not healthy, and I don't think it's how they were made and how they were meant to live life. I grew up with dogs, and we would have our dogs just running around out in the country, and they would come in whenever they wanted, and they would go outside whenever they wanted. And I just think it's the best life for dogs. Yeah. So, I mean, people in the city can make it work if you're walking them. But I just feel like they still have more energy that they need to get out, and it just doesn't always work. That's just my opinion. I just feel like dogs should live in the country, not in the city. Okay, next. Schools might be a little bit more woke in the city rather than in the country. I think they can still be woke in the country, but in the city, I feel like they're a lot more likely to be more woke. I think most things are more woke in the city. Whereas in the country, they're often going to have a little bit more like values, principles, morals. I mean, people in the city might have, like, schools in the city might have principles and values, but they might just be not lined up with the word, just a little more woke type situations, which, you're just going to have that sort of thing in the schools systems, and, that really makes things difficult, I feel like, in all aspects. Living in the city, you might not feel as safe. I kind of already touched on that. I feel like in the city, there's just more opportunities. You have so many. I kind of already said this, though. I feel like there is more opportunities in every level: social, relational, spiritual, food-wise, and so many different opportunities when you live in the city. Whereas in the country, I think things are a lot more limited. Your scope of imagination is limited. Maybe not, because you're in nature. I feel like you can be more free in that way. But when it comes to like relational opportunities, you might not have as many options. Whereas in the city, I feel like there's just more going on. In the city, you can try new city things like indoor skydiving and indoor golfing and different foods and places you've never been to, maybe touristy things that you've never been to. Even if you've lived in a really big city your whole life, I feel like people that do that, they don't always go see the tourist thing in that city. And I feel like I lived in Minnesota for so long, and I don't even know if I saw all the touristy things in that city and in that state. And so that's a really big bummer, but I think in a city you can do that, and I think it's super awesome to be able to do that. You can get to places faster if you don't have traffic, like on a big fast highway, like 80 miles an hour, you can get to places faster. But sometimes the places are a lot closer in proximity. That's another way you can get places faster. But if there is traffic, then everything's going to be slower. You just don't really have traffic in the country. But in the city, you're most likely going to get traffic at certain times, or you will get traffic at certain times. And certain times you can avoid it, obviously. But if you don't have traffic, I feel like in the city you can get places super fast. Because in the country, you have to drive a lot farther to get to, like, anything. Whereas in the city, you're probably only 10, 15 minutes away. But if you're in the country and you want to go to, like, something similar, like a restaurant or something, you're going to have to spend 30, 40, 50 minutes just trying to get there without traffic, you know. You can go in the city to, like, big parties where you don't know anyone and you just get to meet people. I feel like in the country, you're just not going to have that kind of situation where you have really big parties and you don't know anyone. Maybe you don't know one person or two people in the country, but, like, in the city, you're going to go to, like, big parties and you probably won't know the majority of the people in the room. Maybe you'll know people, but if it's a big party, you probably won't know that as many people, unless it's a sort of community that you're a part of. You can go to, like, big national events, maybe, like, the Olympics is in your town or whatever, or your big city. You can go to, like, pro sports games, whereas, like, if you're in the country, you can never do that. They just don't have big stadiums in small towns, obviously. So you can't do that in the country, but you can definitely enjoy that when you live in the city. I don't know why I even put the next thing I'm about to say, but you can enjoy indoor ice skating. I don't even know why I even put that in there. I feel like there's indoor ice skating in the country, but all the places I've lived in the country, there was outdoor ice skating, never indoor ice skating. And I don't even know why I put this one in there, but I just felt like in the city, you can do indoor ice skating. Yeah. Don't ask me why, but I feel like that's a city thing. I feel like maybe because there's hockey rinks, hockey arenas, and people do ice skating in there. There's, like, free skate type deal. But yeah. Anyways, that is the end of my podcast. I hope you enjoyed me comparing and contrasting city versus country. I feel like this was really fun. And I hope you enjoy, and we'll talk to you next week.